Hi, listener. This is From Ideology to Unity, a spiritual journey where we let go of ideological doctrine and ego in favor of meaning, purpose, and unity as a whole. And apparently it's also where you will watch me shining like an angel. Wonderful and high frequency that I am, you see. Yeah, this room really is not a lot of natural light. And this feels weird turning the light on in the middle of the day. And so the result of not turning it on is this. Enjoy. Right. So I decided to record. That wasn't my plan before, but on a whim, I was like, hi self, like pick a book from my bookshelf for me. And I closed my eyes and I picked one. You know, I can't really prove to you that that's what I'm doing, but whatever. And I did. And I let my eyes self pick me a page. And it was this. Okay, so I've got The Answer by David Icke, The Man Who Has Been Proved Right Again and Again. Very humble title, that, and but I have faith in the man. Page 189. And I admit I already read this long paragraph, but I decided it was good, pretty good. So yeah, I'm gonna read from here and give my thoughts as they come. So, the Red Queen says in Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass, now here you see, it takes all the running you can do to keep in the same place. If you want to get far somewhere else, you must run at least twice as fast as that. In fact, when we understand reality, the best way to get somewhere is to stop running and manifest. I broadly would agree, although something that came to me last time I read this was that you can do what you love and manifest while doing that. You don't just need to sit there, meditate and manifest. That might not actually be the best idea. Not saying you can't do that. But there's some people who are like, I'm going to use the law of attraction and I'm going to sit there and do nothing and just attract like money through my inbox. That might not be advisable. But there might be people who've tried it and actually pulled it off. So I don't know. I would suggest doing what you love, at the very least, right? If you're sitting there doing nothing and just waiting for money to come in, well, what are you doing in the meantime? What are you doing with your life in the meantime? Well, if you're not doing what you love, you might not be enjoying yourself as much as if you were. So suppose you're just like, suppose you just wanted to, you could actually, suppose you are passionate about being a writer, you want to be an author perhaps, you've dreamed of that about that for years, but always kind of put it off. But then you're like, but I could get loads of money from manifesting. So you're like focusing on meditating on getting what you want, and you're like, I want this, I want this, I'm doing all the law of attraction stuff to try to get what you want. And you're just sitting there doing that. And then what do you do the rest of your day? You're like, well, I've done the manifesting stuff. I've done like a couple of hours on that or so hours on that. So you're like, I guess I'm gonna play some computer games, right? And you do that, and then you go, oh, I'll watch a movie. And you just repeat this for days and days and days. The thing is, if you're doing this, the whole time you could have actually been writing. But if you were to use the reasoning of, oh, no use acting, you might as well be manifesting, doing nothing, why be running? Where would you be going with regard, A, you wouldn't be enjoying yourself as much. Be honest, you wouldn't. B, you wouldn't be getting somewhere with something that you actually have a passion and a love for that might be a talent of yours. So I agree with what David Icke says, but it's not really a full picture, and it could be taken in a negative way, perhaps. Also, what this evokes to me is this idea of, and he's probably deliberately evoking this, and he's talking about this, is the way in which with 9 to 5, the rat race, they get it so that you can have a 9 to 5 just average job and you'll just about get enough money and to survive by running a certain pace, right? Being metaphorically by working at a hard enough rate. Well, I mean, what you could do is really hustle, have a lack of a work-life balance, so a lack of a personal life, and that way you can get more than enough of what you want. That way you can have a bigger TV and a better car, a bigger house. Isn't that fantastic? More material possessions and more emptiness inside. Fantastic. You're even more of a good slave now. You're just a slave they give more benefits to. You know that slave in, when they used to be a slave in the slavery times in America, like imagine there's a slave, the slave who works in the field, right? Then there's a slave who's been working for longer and he's worked really hard. And it was like, the owner was like, I'm going to reward you, right? I'm going to give you a nice fancy suit and you can be my butler, right? So you don't need to work out on the field. You don't need to work all day for me, but you don't need to work on the field, and I give you some more benefits because you worked so hard for me for all those years, right? Hell, maybe the butler actually works longer hours than the people on the field. But in any case, the butler's like, oh, yes, my pride. He gets all prideful. He's like, oh, I'm so much better than those other guys. I'm a better worker. I'm a better slave. He doesn't even, he might actually stop thinking of himself as a slave. It was like, I feel kind of like I'm free this way. I've freed myself from the trials of working out in the fields. I am now a civilized man who is indoors with the civilized men. And consider that you could hustle and get these really, you could potentially get really good incomes if you really have an imbalance in your life, hardly any personal life, probably a bad relationship with your wife, not properly fathering your kids, or not probably mothering your kids, whatever. I'm judging a bit here, I admit. But like, you could do that. But that makes you even more valuable, and you'll sacrifice even more, and even more for the machine, so to speak, right? The system. It doesn't really, you're not really doing it for yourself though, necessarily. Like, you might say, oh, I'm gaining stuff, but are you doing what you love? Are you really enjoying yourself? Now, you might be lucky. You might find a way, something where you can hustle at something that you enjoy, but we're still kind of working for the corporate machine. My dad was like that. He enjoyed what he did, but he also didn't really spend enough time with his kids. Not as bad, I suppose, but he worked really hard, workaholic, irritable on the holidays. I mean, like, but even then, I mean, the system still benefits. I mean, I'm not saying don't work hard. And I'm not saying don't ever even be employed by a corporation. It's just that there is a system that very much benefits from using human resources. And they call it human resources. That's why I'm calling it that, because that's how they treat you. The whole getting a degree thing, as David Icke alludes to in this, it's a status symbol that they want people to be egotistical about. Pride is something they encourage. And B, this is an idea that you do it the way they want you to. You get the degree, you do the career they want you to, the way you want, they want you to do it. You get the success they want, the way they want you to do it, and you succeed on their terms. or you fail on their terms. And they can't have people doing it their own way and still succeeding. And if they do, they need to find some way to capture that, make them celebrities, and then make them work for the system in some way. And if they don't, well, maybe the media can say some negative things about them, you know? Given that the same, all major corporations, media corporations, are pretty much owned by the same company or same few people, same few companies, you know. So let's read on, eh? The current education system must be dismantled to emphasize play and imagination, to activate the right brain and develop whole people. Well, I mean, yeah. I left school at 15 to play professional soccer and daydream through my school years. Somehow, it must be a miracle, I managed to write and research a stream of highly detailed books. You know, I'm hearing this in his voice with this sort of sense of sarcasm in his tone as well. I don't know if you are. And speak for 10 hours on a go to audiences around the world without a single note. How is it possible when I'm officially so uneducated? A deeply programmed alleged member of the alternative media once said that I could not be taken seriously because I didn't have a degree. She had one. No further comment necessary. So there's even this shaming thing towards people who don't get the officially stamped and approved education system, right? And if you don't, you know, so they don't do it all themselves. They get other people to do it. They train people to shame people who don't follow, who don't conform. That way they can spend less resources on shaming people who don't conform. Again, you know, if you educate people to do it for you, I mean, that's, well, not free, but it's cheaper, right? You know, outsource your social shaming, right? Outsource the control to other controlled people to control the people you want to control for you. Or, well, that's how they do it. Be careful with my words are power, but yeah. All that I learned since I left school with no exam passes has been on my own terms. My son Gareth got an E in some exams because he cared even less about school than I did. Today, he's a highly intelligent man, aware of the world, with a highly creative mind that makes him an exceptional singer-songwriter, and all-round talent in many fields. There's absolutely no need to deluge young minds with information they never use hour by hour, day by day, when they can easily find that information for themselves later when they want to or need to. The deluge is not for the benefit of children and young people. It's for the benefit of the cult and its incessant perceptual programming regime. So imagine, I do like the sound of in America, there's the idea of homeschooling is quite popular, I would say, at least more so than here. And from what I know about homeschooling, people can learn what they want to a large extent, right? And I know inquisitive minds and the right brain, like if you account for that, like inquisitive minds who really want to learn, they can learn a lot, right? And I know from what I've learned, the most valuable things I've learned, like about history, I didn't learn at school. I mean, I admit I had a great history teacher at one point, but honestly, Wikipedia was a great teacher. I know, Wikipedia, I know what you're thinking, but A, it used to be better, and B, to get the broad strokes, it's still useful. Now, I mean, admittedly, there might be things about history that are not as we are told, but to get the broad strokes, still pretty useful. And then you can read books, you can buy books and read them about it. You can even take notes on that. You can look up yourself online how academic researchers actually cite their work. You could learn how to research yourself as a kid, right? Now think about this. Now, and I consider if I were to do this, would have done this when I was very younger, if I didn't have all this education system, you know, get a smart kid, right? Hell, get an average IQ kid who's got an inquisitive mind, right? And although keep in mind that the average IQ now is like way higher than it was when they first started the test. They keep needing to change the way they do it. The reason why they change it to the average IQ, they did a moving average, as opposed to doing it the exact same way and marking IQ the exact same way, is that it kept going up. The scores kept going up. People were getting smarter. And you can't put that down entirely to nature. Actually, no, you can, but you need to account for nature changing. Essentially, we are by nature, our by nature intelligence is increasing over time at a frenetic rate. Why? Because evolution comes in waves. David Walcott talks about this. We're in that wave right now. And it to do with the end of cycles and the beginning of new ones, you know. Everything's circular, spiraling, cyclical, but yes, spiraling. And why do you think there's rapid evolution? Like they keep finding new species. You know, that might not have been occurring 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago. They might not have been finding new species as fast. We assume that it's like that now because we're going out and actually trying to find new species in recent, you know, the last 100 years or 200 years, or whatever. We weren't doing that before. So we don't know what the rate of new species being found was if you search at the same rate. So it could be way more than before. Now, you know, it's been found that chimpanzees have started to use new tools. Like, there is a wave of evolution and growing intelligence in the whole animal kingdom. Now, this is a relative thing, but no, I swear, like, I can't prove it, but I swear cats are getting smarter. I swear it. I can just tell. There's a tendency where they start to exhibit like emotional traits of humans or owners. You know, it's kind of like, the way I see it is it's like they're learning yellow ray tendencies, right? Just like we're learning green ray tendencies. I mean, we've had the potential for that. Actually, no. Am I thinking about it incorrectly? What would make us naturally 2 ahead? No. Yeah, that's it. They've always been orange ray with the capability of going into yellow ray. Like we've always been yellow ray with the capability of going into green ray. Although we've always been red ray, orange ray, and yellow ray with capability of green ray as well. They've always been red ray and orange ray with capability of yellow ray as well. But perhaps some animals, especially the ones that interact with us more, are picking up yellow ray traits at a faster rate. And of all the animals doing that the most, look at chimpanzees and dolphins and stuff, like, damn, it will be ahead of that. So you might be wondering when I'm going to go back into the subject at hand. So essentially we can learn ourselves. And that's we can also learn how to learn ourselves. Are we really taught critical thinking skills? Now, I don't think we're taught that typically. Are we learned to the classical education system, the trivium? No. Do we learn, like, we don't really learn how to learn. We learn how to be conditioned. And we have the ability to teach ourselves. And all we really need is curiosity. All we really need is something to capture our interest, and we can just learn that way. And it's just, I mean, someone of the average IQ can do this because, like, we're naturally this way. And if we start programming ourselves to learn more, we might actually start getting smarter. Now, I know there are some people who are exceptionally of low intelligence, right? But I wonder, you know, in the vein of like Joe Dispenza and stuff, like, how much can they be programmed to be smarter? I'd be curious to see what he can do, what Joe Dispenza could do with someone with Down syndrome. I don't mean this as a way to disrespect them. I mean this because that would give Joe Dispenza a high difficulty, essentially, a high challenge, because they struggle. There's no way around that fact. You know, they cognitively greatly struggle, and if even they could be successful, look at that. Imagine it was like a light being and not the sun streaming it. Yeah. Anyway, so interestingly, he calls it the deluge. Diane Ravitch, an American education historian, policy analyst, and writer, summed it up when she said, "Sometimes the most brilliant and intelligent minds do not shine in standardized tests because they do not have standardized minds. The cult, however, wants a standardized minds and sets up the system to get them." Psychiatrist Ian McGilchrist brightly points out the left brain is focused on knowing ever more about what is already known. No, one thing that frustrated me about my dad when we talked about knowledge is while he was exceptional in his field and combined left brain and right brain in his field, which was property development. He was like an artist on it. But the thing is, like, when it came to knowledge, he was just all like, well, he was all establishment about it. It was like, learn, memorize as much things as, like, he was excellent in exams. That's what he learned to be great at because he did a lot of them for, you know, and like, so to him, educating yourself was memorizing as much established knowledge as possible. And it's funny because he didn't have to view it that way. He had right brain capable, he had a developed right brain too, but like, and if you branch in non-mainstream perspectives, it was largely like, you don't know what you're talking about. That was the response. And that's generally what you get from the establishment at large and from a lot of people, really. You say things that aren't mainstream, they're like, you don't know what you're talking about. I've memorized the things that are how it is, and that I was told are how it is, and you're saying things contrary to that. I invested all this time and energy in learning what they told me to learn is true. And you're saying something else? That would mean that all that investment is worthless. You're cheating. You're not following the rules. The rules are not doing all that, spending all the time, energy, and investment in that. And people don't like that idea. And quite frankly, I'll give you an example from my life. Like, so at a certain point, I decided that I was curious in, I remembered when I since being at university, after my master's, a few years later, I decided that I wanted to get I paid for the right to use one of the university libraries. And I wanted to get access to a whole bunch of online journals on like a USB so that I could research my own right. And so I went to the reception desk in the library and I told the guy, look, outright, this is what I want to do. And while I was working on my computer, I overheard the guy talking to someone else, and I could tell he was talking with me. And it was like, he's cheating, right? The guy seemed pissed off. He was like, he's cheating. That's the whole perspective. There's an established way. We're meant to do it. And if we don't follow that, it's not just, oh, you know what you're talking about, right? If you're coming up with perspectives, alternative perspectives, and learning an alternative way, people feel, because they are investing in, by following all those rules and expectations, they're investing so much in doing that, they resent people for not doing it. And it's understandable that they do. But that's how the system uses us against ourselves. Well, if we look at ourselves as a collective, that is. Man. Anyway, so yeah, and like if you're coming out with alternative perspectives, I mean, if you're interested in conspiracy theories, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because you try to introduce someone to conspiracy theories, he doesn't, and they're looking at like, they'll think, okay, you're kind of crazy. B, they'll be like, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. C, they might even treat you like you're dangerous. Or a D, they might be like threatened by it, partly because they spent all this time learning how it is from established sources. It takes a lot to learn how to be tolerant of non-mainstream things. And you could learn to be diverge in your thinking in certain respects, but in other respects still conform. Like I did that for a long time. Like I was politically coming up with my own ideas about how it all works. But when it came to conspiracy theories, I was like, I was afraid of being judged, I suppose. Afraid of being judged. But that's another way they get you. Because of the way, also, I wanted to be logical and rational. I felt that maybe they weren't. It wasn't. Conspiracy theories weren't logical and rational. But part of it is I was scared of being judged as or shamed by people for not conforming. And that's why I was like, okay, so conspiracy theories, I'm not going to buy into that. Well, there's a nice bird there. So, yeah. And a lot of us, that's how they do it. They use fear, they use shame, and that's how you get mainly, that's one of the two main emotions they use to control people, I would say. Imagine someone who wants me to get progress through this text, right? And they're like, for fuck's sake, Nick, just carry on reading. There's be more, stop talking. I'm going to bet on the fact that most of the people listening actually enjoy me going on tangents. Because I feel like that's the right brain goal, right? The thing with intuition is, I believe you're not just accessing what you know. Intuition might potentially access the Akashic record, maybe even your spirit guides might be helping you. I don't know exactly how intuition works, but I've got the sense that we can't take credit for everything we come to when we're using intuition. But that's a good thing in a way. It's not about you, it's about what you channel through you, right? Does that mean I'm being possessed when I don't use intuition? I'm overthinking it. Okay, so it's the right brain of the heart that wants to explore and uncover the unknown and to have awareness to understand it. So follow what we love, and if we love to learn, just learn ourselves. And if people are like, you should be ashamed, or trying to shame you for it, or telling you, or you're afraid of judgment. Well, why is that? A, we're conditioned to be shamed, partly by our parents, but they kind of condition them so that each generation, so that happens. B, well, fear and shame, they are actually things that we may well be able to learn fear of, especially of judgment of others. So fear and shame are pretty core things from that. And like rage and bitterness, I would say proliferate from that. But I would say, like, it shows that you've got inner work to do, doesn't it? Shadow work to do. It actually points to what you could clear out. If you can clear out that fear, clear out that shame, let yourself feel it, don't repress it, let it flow out of you. You just let yourself feel it and observe that that's what you're feeling. Eventually, you'll clear it out, especially at this time. And then what? Then you can explore these new ideas, and other people will judge you for it, laugh at you for it, whatever. And you won't feel afraid and you won't feel ashamed, and you'll just carry on doing it. And because of the way law of attraction works, if you're afraid of judgment from others, when you explore new ideas, you will get judgment from them. And a fear, and what you fear, they will act the way you fear they'll act towards you. They will be attracted to acting that way towards you. I know that from experience. I can't really prove it, but it kind of makes sense with the law of attraction, the way it works. And from my experience, like, it's been precisely what I feared. I mean, especially, I suspect that because it was the year before 2000 and before the solstice, the beginning of the age of Aquarius, but formally, like 2020 was a special year. There was way more catalyst than there normally be. And I feel like maybe our spirit guides, all sorts of things, the universe has been deliberately throwing more catalyst at us in one way or another. It might be COVID, it might be something else, it might be both. But anyway. Yeah, I honestly experience, the way I experience it is, what I experienced negatively as catalyst corresponded to what I was afraid of and other negative emotions I had within me. So that may well happen to you too. So Canadian-born psychiatrist Eric Byrne describes the perceptual difference between the hemispheres. The moment a little boy is concerned with which is a jay and which is a sparrow, left brain, he can no longer see the birds or hear them sing, right brain, heart. And it's funny, my dad used to always look up like what bird was which when he was looking at them. And well, my attitude is that a bird is a bird and it's pretty and it's got a nice tweet, and you can just like admire it in that sense. So, maybe I haven't been left brain conditioned as much as I thought. I know at times I've got way too overanalytical going overthinking things, but I think I've got a left brain and right brain sort of balance, I suppose. It's interesting because if you've got ADHD, if you've been diagnosed with ADHD and Asperger's, I mean, you've got something that's more right brain, and you've got something more left brain and more right brain, and it's kind of like tugged in two directions. And why can't you allow both directions? Why can't you allow the contradiction? It's a good thing to have that balance of two different spheres, right? As long as you don't let one take over too much. Although taking the right brain, I'm taking over more. I mean, is that all bad? The moment a little, yeah. He can only, yeah. This is just an example of the label limitation, a division at the expense of unity of oneness. Can't disagree with that. Well, I could, but yeah, yeah. The education system is about indoctrination of known allegedly, of the unknown allegedly. The cult doesn't want us to know the publicly known. No, the cult doesn't want us to know the publicly unknown. I'm not saying all mainstream academics and scientists are knowingly suppressing knowledge. They're in the bubble too. I'm saying the cult asset academics and scientists are doing that which is a relative view. For the scam to work, mainstream everything in general must also be kept from the truth and diverted into misunderstanding and dead ends. There is also immense difference between knowledge and knowing, which education cannot teach. It comes from within. The mystic Osho said, knowledge has no capability to dispel ignorance. Knowledge is a false phenomenon. It is not wisdom at all. It is the opposite of wisdom. Knowledge is borrowed. Wisdom is the flowering of your innermost being. No university can offer it. No scripture can offer it. And no scholarship is capable of doing it. They are impotent efforts, but they have been deceiving millions of people for thousands of years. Yes, they make you knowledgeable. To be knowledgeable is one thing, to know is totally different. You know, I suppose I'm reflecting now on what I'm doing now. Because I'm reading a book, I've got a whole book of bookshelves, right? I'm reading based on that. And you could say I'm researching. I mean, when I'm doing those readings and reviews, right? But that's the thing, I'm doing reviews. And that's why it's a good thing that I'm going on these tangents, because I get knowledge to the extent that it's beneficial, but because I'm also greatly using it as inspiration and as a springboard for my intuition, I feel like the way I'm doing it is a sort of combination of left brain and right brain. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's how I feel. So, and also doing readings from larger books at, chosen by my higher self, spirit guides or whatever, I feel that is, it's a way to get around the problem. So you can do research at the same time as giving content. It's great. Because if I were to spend loads of time reading, if I wanted to provide content for you guys based on that, I'd have to write lots of notes based on it. And then I'd have to record things based on those notes. It'd be quite an arduous process. And it might mean that by the time I'm actually recording the ideas that I've come up with, I might, onto the microphone, I might not have that passion in me. And then there'll be the script, and then I'll have to get the script right. And then I'll be like, that'll take the passion out of my voice. And I tried YouTubing before. I did one video, and I was like, I wasn't so interested. It took me like a week or something to do that one video. And from what I hear, I don't want to do it with that style. So I'm going to do it like this, unless I get some serious negative feedback about my approach. And even then, if this feels right, I might just do it. Oh, yeah, for your information though, if you want to see an image that represents left brain and right brain, wait, how am I going to do this? Look at that image there. That represents the whole thing quite well, doesn't it? I mean, the left brain is there for a reason. It's not like we've got a left brain and a right brain, and the test that we're provided with, can you use the right brain instead of the left brain, even though we're learned. It's not like we're supposed to choose one or the other. No, we're just not meant to dominate the right brain with the left brain. That's all, right? That's all. We can have a balance of both, and that generally works better. In fact, from what I hear, what I heard, that what's the word? Can't say statistically aligns. Corresponds, correlates with high IQ. Oh yeah. Better work my shaft and flatter myself, eh? But that's what's on. Someone close to me said. Someone I'm actually going to interview. Because they're some good ideas. Yeah. So I wasn't done with that paragraph, was I? No university can offer it, no scripture can offer it, and no scholarship is capable of doing it. They are all impotent efforts, but they have been deceiving millions of people for thousands of years. Yes, they make you knowledgeable. To be knowledgeable is one thing, to know is totally different. Maybe I did finish it. The point is, I think you know the point really. I don't think me or Ike would be saying don't know. Knowledge is all bad. They're just saying like to put knowledge on a pedestal and only focus on that as education, like that is just telling us a fact, really. Perception lobotomy. Okay, he has a funny way of putting things, doesn't he? Children and young people are indoctrinated to the mainstream, everything's version of history, science, medicine, politics, current events, life itself, all of it. Education, quote, education is cult-created programming machine. Is a cult-created programming machine constantly underscored by the controlled media, which I'll be coming to shortly. Kids that want to question, challenge the orthodoxy, or are plain bored stiff like I was, are called disruptive influences and increasingly prescribed mind-altering drugs like Ritalin for attention disorders. We have the medicalization of childhood, medicalization of growing up, and extends into colleges, universities as the medicalization of teenage experience, essentially to develop emotionally strong, full-rounded adults capable of looking life in the eye. Here we have children in the prime of life sitting in a prison waiting for the bell to ring to enjoy a modicum of freedom, homework apart, which today is defined as time on my smartphone. They are being prepared for an entire life in an adult prison after school. In an adult prison after school becomes work. The teacher becomes the boss, and obeying authority is seen as essential to financially survive in adulthood, while as with childhood, often counting the minutes to home time. Obey the teacher is replaced by obey the boss, in a seamless life of external control, in which the only characters and names change. Quick, get up, you'll be late for school, becomes quick, get up, you'll be late for work. What will the teacher say becomes what will the boss say. Children from the earliest age are programmed by representatives of authority with carrot and stick punishment and reward for those who not conform. Those who conform or do not. Punishment and reward for those who perform or do not. This too is ingrained in the subconscious as a fear of not obeying authority. None of this is by chance. I mean, the reason I'm not really saying things to this is that it's gold. Charlotte Isabet realized this fact when she was a policy advisor to the Reagan administration at the US Department of Education. She describes in a book the deliberate dumbing down of America, how she saw documents laying down the restructuring of American and global education through the computerization designed to make perception programming even more effective. Isabet said that what she saw was like a communist brainwashing, and that this will become extremely relevant later. One manual by Professor Ronald Havelock was aptly titled The Change Agent Guides to Innovation in Education. Isabel says that she was trained to identify resistors who were those good, smart Americans who realize that everything that has education hanging off the end of it is probably not what they're looking for. She was told to go up against them and actually go and try to get them to join us through the group process system. This is the groupthink, group absorption technique to either suck in or marginalize opposing views and ideas, a modus operandi at every level of human society. Okay, here's the thing though, right? You might be afraid of what happens if you don't conform, especially if they recognize what you're like. if they see someone, suppose you, maybe it's like you come on online or something, right? And you're saying things that are a bit different, right? They notice that. And they also notice, you know, working for a corporation or something, you're not part of the system. You haven't been, and not just that, you haven't been brought into the system formally. But suppose you actually start thinking of yourself and doing your own thing. They might be like, this guy's a problem. Well, this woman's a problem. We could do something about that. We could start marginalizing them. Let's find something to, whatever we can, real or not. Let's find what we can to smear them with that, demonize them with that. And the thing is, it only really works if you're afraid of it. If you can let go of that, you'll be all right. And do you really want to live in fear? When you can live with your open heart, open your heart more, doing what you love. If you could do that, isn't that a better way to live? Like a way that you can actually enjoy life more? And if people laugh at you, if you get demonized for it, like maybe it's better to learn to care less about that and to just be free in how you do it, even if they try to marginalize you. I mean, if David Icke can actually be successful, it means that their attempts to actually marginalize people, it can't be all successful, can it? For years, people were laughing at him and he kept on going. Look at him now. He's increasingly more well respected. I know some people will scoff at me saying that, but it's actually true. He's actually taken more seriously than he used to be. And for you, you're in the fortunate position where there's a great awakening happening. So you're not going to have to wait so long before you're taken seriously. You're not going to have to be ashamed for as long, afraid for as long. And plus, if you do the inner work, you'll probably get targeted even less anyway. Well, you wouldn't care so much. So yeah, I mean, don't be absorbed into the groupthink. They may even try to recruit you. Don't join them. Don't do it. And in fact, increasingly, you will be at the, if you follow that approach, the approach that I'm suggesting, you will be at the forefront. It's like, imagine like, I saw this sketch show, right, years ago. It was actually the Mitchell Webb look, funny enough. And there was this thing where there was this one guy and he's like, he's making like flint, like spear tips, right? It's his job and he's doing that. And then this other guy comes along, he's got like a bronze helmet, bronze everything. It's kind of ridiculous how much bronze he's got on him, right? It's like, oh, bronze is a new thing, and it's all rattling as he goes on, right? And like, and he's unpleasant. He's like, the main character is like the first guy. He's like, I don't like this. All this change, all this. I don't want to do that. I know what I'm going to do. I know how to do it. And the other guy's like, well, fine, but maybe. But this is the new thing, and I can't remember how to quote it properly, but the idea was like, well, this is the future, and you might find yourself in a bit of trouble if you don't do it our way. And there's even a sort of tacit threat that, you know, we've got, well, okay, I'm not going to digress too much in this case. The point is that when there's a new age and a new way of doing things, the quicker on the uptake you are, the more ahead of the curve you are, the more you'll actually have an advantage. Although interestingly, with this age, having an advantage is less important, but still, you'll be able to serve others quicker and more effectively this way. If you just get in, okay, and then fundamentally, if you've got a choice, one is a choice, you've got a choice, you're afraid, one option is, if you've got a choice, and that choice is between love and fear, choose love. Otherwise, what are you choosing for yourself and society would be more fear, or between love and shame. Love, right? Just consider that. Every time you're not sure what to do and you've got a choice, and one of them is a fear choice, or a love, or a shame choice, or a hatred choice, or whatever, right? A resentment choice. And one is a love choice, or a joy choice, or a passion choice, or a peace choice. You know, choose love, right? Or the equivalent, right? If we do that like every time, that's an upward trajectory. Although, unless you're trying to do shadow work, unless you're actually trying to confront your shadow, in which case you might actually choose the other one. But I don't know, it depends. Anyway. This is groupthink, group absorption technique, to either suck in or marginalize opposing views and ideas, a modus operandi employed by every level of human society. What Isabate saw was planned in these documents in the 1980s has been rolled out, and worse, all over the world, and it is transforming human life as the young subjected to this become adults. Central to mass indoctrination through fake education in the United States is the programming operation called Common Core, much promoted by the big-time cult asset Bill Gates, who turned up in financial support of a long list of cult agendas. These include mass vaccination of children worldwide. Gates is a very sinister piece of work, and there is a lot more Gates. A lot more to come out about him when I get to the COVID-19 hoax. When was this written? When was this published? August 2020. So in the early months of this year, he must have been prolifically writing. The pillars of standardized state education indoctrination were erected by the 1% through vehicles such as the Rockefeller and Ford Foundations, and today's state child programming is dominated by the 1% Gates Foundation. The fronts may change, but the cult always is in control. Well, they will lose control though. They are losing control already. Organizations associated with the cult agent George Soros were behind a transformation of the Russian education system based on the Western model after the fall of the Soviet Union. School life was extended by a year, textbooks replaced, and schools amalgamated in a period that saw plummeting levels of education and literacy. Interesting. Soviet education was, of course, dictated by government, but the Western model of Rockefeller, Gates, and Soros is aimed at global standardization of indoctrination and centralized control. I read a book published in 2018 by American teacher Rebecca Friedrichs, and the title said it all, Standing Up to Goliath. Her 28 years in education showed how our children were being politically and perceptually indoctrinated on an industrial scale, with tyrannical teaching unions forcing upon young minds what I'm calling the cult agenda. She describes how teachers who can see what is happening and vehemently oppose it are intimidated into silence and acquiescence. This is being done to parents and society as a whole through cult-instigated political correctness. You know, this is why kids would be better off leaving school as soon as possible. As soon as possible. How? If they were to truant, perhaps a blind eye to that truanting would perhaps be responsible. Hell, it's easier to truant now than it ever has been. Because there's all this using Zoom and everything. What you do, just don't use Zoom. Oh, my computer's broken. I'm sorry. I just can't fix it. Whatever they do, they just don't fix it. I can't fix my computer. I've been trying for months. I'm sorry, I guess I just can't complete your course. I'll do it next year. See? I'm sorry, my mum's too poor, you know, we can't afford to fix our computer. I guess I just have to skip another year. Hell, you know what? It wouldn't be all bad if you didn't have a computer. Says me, but yeah, easy for me to say that. I've exposed the plan for decades to delete parental rights and hand control of children and their upbringing to the state, cults, by giving ever more power to schools and social services to destroy parental rights and control the lives of children. Also, note that they add how many years you need to study at school. I mean, now it's 18 in the UK. When I grew up, it was 16. Now it's 18. No, I stayed to 18. But there you go. Primary school in England announced that it would fine parents for every 5 minutes they were late picking up their children and threatening to call social services if they took too long. The usual poorest parents struggling to juggle work to survive with getting to school on time would be the ones to suffer. See? Those are the consequences of the system we have. If we acquiesce, continue to acquiesce, if we just keep conforming to this, if the elites were to get their way, this cult, you know, whatever you call it, it'd be dystopian, no way around it. It would be awful. Oh, see, I'm awakening, see? It would be awful. Now, from what I've been learning, for what a lot people are saying, you know, in this awakening, you know, we are going to be free eventually. It just, do we take the quick route or the long route? Depends on what timeline you want to be on, right? I am not yet totally confident about us avoiding dystopia being definite. Although I'm increasingly inclined to have faith and trust the process. But I'll admit that I haven't entirely cleared my fear from within yet. I'm on an awakening journey too. Yeah, it's a journey. You're not going to get there overnight, and there's bumps in the road and all that. So parents fined by schools is a critical line to cross in the power of schools over families, and was already widespread in Britain, with parents fined if they take their children on holiday in term time, when the cost of holidays is so much cheaper, once again hitting the poorest. I mean, I don't think it was like this when I grew up, even. The deeply corrupt authorities in the Isle of Wight, where I live, with a population of 142,000, revealed through the Freedom of Information Act request, they accrued more than 100,000 in the previous year, fining parents and carers whose children had unauthorized absences. Well, what a great way to get more finances, eh? I mean, it only hurts the actual constituents. I mean, it's not like politics is to represent, it's not like they're supposed to be a democracy representing the people, but it's not like there actually is really a democracy anyway, is there? It's only been long ago, actually. There was someone who is a friend of my dad's, actually one of my dad's directors, their husband. Now, he was a champagne socialist. That's how it was described by my parents, but you know, they got along. And I was talking to him, and he told me once, he told me that democracy was are like a valve. It was a way of getting so that people, so that dissent, or, to prevent revolution or to prevent upheaval or whatever. I can't think of the exact phrasing you use, but basically prevent dissent through the election. So if people feel they're choosing who they have, and if people get rid of, if the public blame a certain figure for things going wrong, they lose that figure, they get a new person. They're like, oh, yes, we have control, we have freedom, we have a say, right? And so that there's a valve that always prevents the establishment being overthrown, because the people are like just about satiated. But what we're having now is that increasingly the valve isn't good enough. Well, I mean, potentially you could be a populist leader to do it, like Trump or something, but even then, they try desperately to prevent figures like that getting what they want, or populist movements, because they don't want that. They want traditional parties, traditional leaders that just get blamed for the next thing and to keep on passing the buck. But can that system work? Eventually, we're going to have to make a choice. Are we going to acquiesce? Or are we going to refuse? There's a lot more of us than there are of them. And I admit, sometimes I'm a hypocrite. I mean, I could just outright refuse to wear a mask every single situation. Maybe David Icke does that. Like, you go to the pharmacy, just refuse to wear a mask. What are you going to do then? Like, not wear it. And if they say, oh, we're going to call the police, what, ignore them? And then what are you going to do? What if they refuse to serve you? You're like, I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. I don't have the answer to it. In fact, whenever I acquiesce, whenever I go to the pharmacy wearing a mask, I don't like it. It bothers me. It bothers me that I'm doing that, that I'm acquiescing. I know I'm acquiescing when I acquiesce, and I don't like it because I know what it means. But if enough people actually refused with this stuff, what could they do? What could they actually do if enough people did it? Enough people came together and said, okay, we're going to stop acquiescing. And then together they stopped doing it. If enough people did that, people went to prison in World War I. People went to prison for not signing up. Wait, no, that's wrong. They got demonized for not signing up in World War I. In World War II, they went to prison for not signing up. They were willing to suffer, pay the price for their beliefs. Has it changed so much that we can't do that now? I'm just putting it out there. Oh, wow. So I'm just going to skip ahead to the next page briefly, because there's something he said that amuses me. So there's this diagram here. Anyway, it's basically what the education system does to young people. So you see kids, they're really like inquisitive and playful. Then it's like obey, memorize, and then you see a bunch of blank-faced sort of drone-looking humans. And this is what the education system does to young people. Tell them to fuck off, kids. I love the way David Icke puts things. It's great. I love it. I love it. I love it. Tell them to fuck off, kids. oh man. Seriously, David Icke's on YouTube. Like, what's his channel called? I'm gonna find it. I'm gonna be finishing off this episode soon, but so what's the must be the bigger figure nationally? It's an Orwellian racket. Schools are becoming dictatorships and tyrannies with surveillance cameras, and in America, police officers on duty preparing kids for their planned adult life in an Orwellian nightmare. I mean, yeah. I agree. And I could keep on reading that bit, but honestly, I think you get the theme. So education is programming us. Work to work. It's all the same thing. It's, are you following the system or are you doing your own thing? You know, are you learning to learn yourself? Do we need this education system as it has been? With all this technology, we don't need it. We need it even less. But even before, we could have just read our own books and used even in the 19th century, kids could have grown up and they could have researched using books and using academic methods for learning, or at least at the very least journalistic methods for research. And they could have done that for, or even less. People could have just learned, take notes, and people could have learned based on books that already existed. They could have encouraged kids to do experiments, and how maybe the education could be giving extra funding for kids for that. Maybe the funding for education should be, honestly, I think there should be entirely homeschooling, and the funds should go towards special freelance teachers that go around helping homeschoolers teach. And these teachers, these special teachers, ignore that. My mum's here, she's going to do it. No, right. So, and these special teachers could be tasked, their job could be do what the parents ask you to do. So they wouldn't be in charge. Like, if we had this, like maybe if there's the kid wants to do science, they could provide special funding towards, like, you know, kits to try out chemistry. You know, like, I feel like we could educate way better. And in fact, without this non-technology in like 19th century, it still could have been done in the 19th century, perhaps even earlier. We don't need to have an education system like what we do. We don't at all need it, especially now. We don't. They conditioned us to believe this. And if you're afraid of what people think of you, well, learn to just accept not being, you know, learn to accept, do the inner work. I'm increasingly becoming less afraid of what people think of me and how people act towards me. Don't get me wrong, it was a bumpy road. At a certain point, I was terrified. That's another thing, right? The longer you wait to clear out that negativity, to clear out that fear within you of being judged, which is, by the way, a combination of fear and shame, which is not a good cocktail. The longer you wait, the more likely, if your choice is, if you really want to serve others, or at least if you're on a soul level you do, like, you're going to be increasingly tested to more extreme degrees. And what does that mean? For me, it meant that the more over time you delay, my opinion is that, my impression is that the more what you fear will happen to more extreme degrees until you have made a choice of polarity. Now, if you were to choose service to self, it would stop. But you'd have to deal with the consequences of service to self choice, which probably would be being miserable, to be honest. I don't think service to self people are happy. It's not the easy path. Honestly, it's the hardest path. And ultimately, after all that progress, after many, many lifetimes, they can't get beyond the early stages of sixth density, and they have to go all the way back over it all again. They need to go undo all that, essentially, completely change their polarity, and then learn to be service to others so they can get beyond that, you know. But I'm still, it's your free will. You choose your path. That could be seen as advantages. I mean, there had to be some beings giving service to self for the sake of catalyst, though we might be moving towards more integration, although that's on a bigger scale, I suppose, than we. For now, we need to be concerned, we've got things. We've got Earth to worry about. We don't need to worry about what's going on a universal level yet. Like, not necessarily. Like that comes later, at least till after the awakening is complete. So, yeah, the education system is like prisons. Interesting that. So if you're afraid of being imprisoned for not obeying, consider that if you go to work and follow their main, you know, what they're teaching us to do, increasingly, what's the difference? That's a big flaw in their whole plan, isn't it? If they're making it increasingly like what they're going to punish us for doing, if they punish us a certain way for not following, not obeying, but the punishment, what happens if you don't punish? Sorry, I'm saying it wrong. If what happens if you follow the rules is increasingly similar to what happens if you don't, the punishment is increasingly less effective. It's like they're boiling a frog, right? But the frog, it's like boiling a frog, but the only difference is that yeah, I mean, those are different metaphors. I can't combine them. But yeah, it's a bit like that. But in other ways, yeah, you might as well dissent now. The more of us do it, the better. The more, also, the more people dissent, the easier it becomes to get away with dissenting, in a sense. I mean, I wonder how much of the military globally will actually refuse to follow commands. Consider the Russian Civil War. All it took, it only didn't take that much. I mean, from what I heard, it was the Cossacks that really turned the tide for the Red Army. But like, maybe police forces, if enough of us, regular people, start not complying, you might be surprised at how many people in aspects of who have the keys to power, or organizations that do, you know, actually refuse to comply as well. From what I hear, this is more in the sort of white hat sort of direction of things. There's talk about like there's military personnel and ex-military personnel who are, there's a lot of them in a position to engage in higher stakes dissent. In fact, that might have already been occurring. We don't know what happened. There might be things that happened on the 21st that we won't know about for a while, and we're going to find out. But the thing about the 21st of December is that around that time, Mars is actually quite prominent in terms of astrology. From what I recall, from the guy who watches Leo King, not that regularly, only recently, but the impression I'm getting is that if Mars is prominent, there might have been a whole bunch of arrests and military operations even, or even paramilitary operations having already occurred successfully, and arrests made and so forth against CIA operatives and stuff. I don't know. I'm not advocating it. All I'm saying is it might have already occurred. See, I can't get in trouble for what I'm suggesting might have already occurred. Just speculation. Yeah, and if Mars is favored, and we've gone past the point where Capricorn is, which is more to the establishment, is favored. So there was a time shortly before the 21st, or maybe the elite they had their last opportunity, right? But now we're in a position where increasingly they're losing ground. This year, this is the year that the Cabal falls, or at least where the Cabal loses its footing and its fall becomes utterly inevitable, which it pretty much is already. No, I could be wrong about a whole bunch of stuff. But I have faith that I'm not. I have faith that the end of the cult, the cabal, whatever you call it, I mean, the cabal is a cult. So, I mean, much of a muchness, you know, it's coming. Oh, here's an interesting symbol for the education system. Students with boxes on their heads. Here's a thing, right? Suppose you notice that you've been a more left brain thinker, that generally you might be like, oh man, I've been doing it the wrong way. Or you might be like, well, nothing wrong with that. But I suppose you have been more of a left brain thinker, little picture apartness, thought, five senses, scientist, academic, politician, journalist, systems thinker. Right? Well, imagine if you opened up, you start meditating, if you started exploring right brain capability, which you have a whole section of your brain dedicated to it, you do have the capability to it. The more connections you make between the left brain and right brain, like, trust me, if you think you're not artistic, you're wrong. Everyone's artistic as a human trait. Some people maybe have made more connections and more in touch with that aspect of themselves, but everyone's artistic. Everyone's got right brain capabilities, right brain. Big picture, connections, intuition, higher self, artist, creative, out of the box, imagination, maverick. Now, there are some people, they're more right brain focused. And these sort of people are the people who are more of them seem to be in the awakening circles, right? Right? And there might even be a lack of critical thinking in left brain in the awakening circles. There might even be that to some extent. But imagine if someone like you, if you're left brain focused, right, and you start exploring your right brain and getting into the awakening circles, we could be valuable. Well, I say we, because I've always been creative, but I learned to be very left brain. And I would say I do relate to the idea of being a systems thinker. I like systems. Systems are fascinating to understand. But if you combine that with creative and out of the box thinking, like an intuition, connections, if you look at systems are all about connections, that's the thing. And to really understand systems, by the way, everything in reality pretty much works in systems. Intuition is and connections, big picture, that's valuable, right? Combine it together. That's, if you look at what great minds do, like Einstein, do you think he was all right brain or all left brain? No, they combine the two. That's how the greatest minds do it. So, yeah. And if you're all right brain, you've been all right brain. I mean, first of all, well done for being predominantly right brain in a society that's predominantly left brain. Well done if you're all like that. And retain that, absolutely. But if you could combine critical thinking and a bit of logic with your right brain tendencies, I mean, that would be fantastic too. Okay, so suppose you're afraid of what happens if you descend, but we're in a train heading to a cliff. Well, what we fall into from that is actually dystopia, but there we go. So maybe it's not going over a cliff. Maybe it just goes downhill into this awful dystopian nightmare. And you can see this dystopian nightmare. Increasingly, it's visible. You can start to see the smoke of air. You can see this it's just a nightmare vision of a society, awful, horrific city you can see, increasingly visible as you're getting closer, right? But every time you stop and you're working on the train, and in fact, you're shoveling coal into it. And every time you stop working to look at the scenery, the view of your scenery, or you're like, no, I feel like taking a break, they start whipping you, right? And suppose you're scared of what happens if they whip you. And both also, there's the other workers like, you're a bad worker. We are doing all this work and you're not doing it, and you're a bad person for not shoveling the coal like as hard as you should do or whatever. And you're scared of what happens if you don't shovel that coal like you're told to. But you know where you're going. You can see how horrific it is. You might as well stop shoveling, stop acquiescing. I mean, he's right about this. I mean, so like, I mean, I'm sure there's plenty more I could talk about from this book. This book is great. I'm gonna, yeah, it would be good to, oh, we even talk some Gnosticism in this. You know, yeah, this book looks great. This book looks great. Definitely, definitely. So, yeah, I'm gonna leave it at this for this episode. This is gonna be about indoctrination and stuff. I'll think of a title. Yeah, if this was, I enjoyed doing this. Hopefully you enjoyed it too. Yeah. Have a nice, enjoy your new year and Boxing Day and the rest of this. Enjoy the age of Aquarius coming. Enjoy the next year because it's going to be a bit of a bumpy ride, but by the end of it, it'll be getting better. So, bye for now.